Welcome to Flânuers, the podcast where Matt, Sanjiri, and I get together and talk about the things that have piqued our interest over the past week or so. Today, we're joined by Pete Anderson. You see Pete sitting down there with his Giddy Up t-shirt, although you may not be able to see it depending on where the name bar comes in. Pete heads up he is a partner in charge of the business agility practice at Turnberry Solutions. And more than that, Pete is just an awesome guy. So Pete, I actually flew out to meet Pete in person in Minnesota. And when we went out, so I have in my hand this little token from Falling Knife Brewery, because Pete's a brewery guy. So he likes all these craft breweries. He's got all these stickers all over his refrigerator. And so we're sitting here at this bar, and they have these wooden nickels that give you, it says on the back, good for one free full pour at Falling Knife. And the bartender had no intention of giving this up because Pete wanted me to have it as like a souvenir. And so Pete sat there the whole night just berating the guy. I mean, not in a bad way, but he's just like playfully like, come on, you can give me one of those. Come on, just give me one of those things. Just give it up. And finally the guy, he goes over, he grabs when he throws it down. So I have this little Falling Knife nickel because of Pete. So, with that story,
change agent persistence is what that is.
Persistence. Yeah. So Pete, with that, why don't you tell us a bit about yourself?
Absolutely. So as you said, I'm a partner at Turnberry. It's a consulting practice. My portion of the practice is about 140 consultants that do coaching, product management, and agile delivery. And we help organizations transition from project ways of working to product ways of working for the most part. We also do some staff augmentation. So there may be other strategies that organizations are taking where they just need help in delivering what they've already defined. And so we do that as well as defining the strategy and helping them deliver it. So I've been in the product space for about 10 years. I've been in software delivery for about 30. Makes me feel a little bit old. But basically anything, but my first couple decades were business analysis, project management, program management. So I've got a ton of empathy for folks that have worked in those ways. And then kind of stumbled into product about a decade ago and fell in love with it because of the human impact of really bringing all of yourself to bear and having everybody bring all of themselves to bear as opposed to just their titles to solving customer problems. So we'll get into more of that later, but that's me at a high level. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Got a couple of adult kids and a wife of 25 years, and that's me.
Welcome, Pete.
And
thanks for
an avid Packers fan. I can tell by your background.
I thought that would probably be self-explanatory before it was all said and done. So.
All right. So we're big on Jordan Love. At least you guys got yourselves a QB this year. So
absolutely. Cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously. That's good.
Yeah. Of course, when I say football, Matt's thinking soccer. So
exactly. It's okay. It's okay to be wrong. It's not a big deal.
I'm thinking gridiron.
Yeah.
Oh, gridiron. Got it. So today, topic today, a week or so ago, Matt and I were on a call and we were waiting for Sanjiri to join, and we started getting on this thread about SAFe, and I had been worked up in some comment threads and seeing people bash SAFe. And for the record, I'm neither pro nor con SAFe. It's just a tool. I've worked with clients who have used it, and I'll work with them again. And I say, like, look at what SAFe did really well. And what they did was product management. They talked to their customers. They understood what they wanted. And their customers are giant corporations. And they gave them what they wanted. And they gave them a roadmap and all these trainings and certifications and all this stuff that apparently people wanted. And they made it work for what their customer wanted. I said, go emulate that and just build a better SAFe. And so stop sitting on the sidelines talking about how terrible it is. Go build a better thing and be in the game. Or explain why your method's better instead of sitting attacking that method. Like, it would be more productive. So that was my frame up, and Matt had a response, and I thought, well, this makes for a great conversation. So I actually, because I said Matt has a response, I want to flip first to Matt. I did bring in, and I actually need to start the timer. I always forget that. So let me start the timer. I'm going to flip to Matt first, and I brought Pete because I'm curious on his perspective, having been at big retailer I won't name unless he names it, and Sanjiri obviously bringing the usual perspective. So to Matt.
So, yeah. So you are a bigger advocate of safe than I am, which we often get into, don't we? But I think what you mostly talk about is what a marketing machine it is, and you can't deny how good that is. And I can't deny how good it is as a marketing machine. But I think the conversation, if I remember correctly, the conversation went something along the lines of what you just said there, and then you said people should stop grumbling and they should just make a better safe if they don't like safe. And I think I responded, well, there is a better safe. It's all the other stuff that we do that hasn't been built up into safe. It's like the disaggregated safe. One of the other things that safe is really good at is co-opting and going around and I don't want to say stealing, but pinching ideas from other people. Even like, fairly recently, they pinched some ideas where the people they pinched them off have said, get off my idea. It's not yours and I don't want it in there. So it causes that sort of powerful response. And I think so, like in general, what I think, yeah, people do buy safe because it gives them the sort of comfort. In the same way that people buy, big organizations buy advice off big consultancies, because it gives them this false sense of security. So yeah, I think my big thing is think safe is big. It starts big. It's very complicated. But one of our mottos, or one that I like to say, is think big, start small, learn fast. And you don't get that with safe. So that's my sort of lead into this conversation, I think.
Following on to that, just one thing. I don't believe that I am an advocate for safe. I think that's a misrepresentation of my stance. I've never been an advocate for safe, right? I certainly don't attack it, and I certainly see where it has value. And I do differentiate marketing from what I call product management. Like if I look at what they did, I think it's a slight against safe. And this is why people think I promote it, is because I'm like, I don't think it's fair to safe. Like, I think that they do a good job of product management in the sense that they talk to their customers, they hear the complaints, and they build it in. That's right, of their product, of their own product.
Which is different from
right, and
giving people a solution to their own product management problems.
Oh, 100%. Yes. I'm saying they're doing a good job of product management of their product, which is beyond just marketing. I think saying it's just marketing I think it's overly, not prejudicial, but I think I don't think it's kind to safe. And I like to try and just be fair.
Just an opinion I'm expressing. I'm not that. But Peter, you're like, I'm not necessarily a product person, am I? I never really saw.
And this wasn't about you, Matt. I see people online do it all the time, right? It happens on LinkedIn. People say, oh, well, Safe's just really good at marketing. I said, I think there's more to it than that. Like, I think we should look at what they do really well and give them credit for that. And also steal it, do what they did really well and do the same thing to get in those. That's always been my argument. And so I think it's undercutting it and underselling it to say it's just marketing, which is not a thing about you, Matt. It's about, that's a common, it's a common thing that I hear, right?
Yeah.
And so, Pete, why I wanted you on is, when Matt had said start small, or think big, start small, learn fast, right? That is different from an experience that you had. And I thought, well, Pete would be a great perspective to hear about a different way to approach it that he's seen work.
Sure. Thank you for the intro context. It's helpful. I'll start by saying I'm value stubborn and framework agnostic. And so as much as I've had experiences that are going to be on both sides of this coin, as far as the scope with which we move forward with change and so on. But the one story that you had invited me in for was, again, Fortune 50 retailer type of experience where a new CIO came in we'd already had some grassroots effort on ongoing change to move toward a product mindset and through product ways of working. And this particular individual came in and said, you know, I don't have to prove that product works, and I don't have to prove that agile works. Those things have already been done in many different places, and I'm committed to getting us to that place. And so as much as we called it kind of a bigger bang change, it still took 4 years. Like it included things like having a sweeping change on project management is no longer a job family initially. They literally eliminated the job family altogether. Business analysis eliminated altogether. We had a pretty traditional model of technology, operations, and business, and the operations teams were middlemen and women between those two groups. And slowly but surely, those groups were eliminated as well, so that the walls were broken down between business and tech, and product ultimately lived in the business before it was all said and done. And so the net result was 35% fewer human beings at headquarters, about 50% increase in productivity, and at our height, it was a quintuple improvement in stock price before it was all said and done. It was also a flip of 80% contractors in the engineering space to 80% FTEs in the engineering space, to create an engineering culture. And it was standing up upwards of 350 teams across the enterprise that were considered product teams. Whether you were, I focused on the enterprise side, so all the software that runs the business, from merchandising to supply chain to stores, et cetera. And there were sub pockets of the organization that were using SAFe, since that's part of the topic today. And what we ended up doing was basically saying that you can use SAFe if you want to, but we're going to align across the enterprise, across monthly and quarterly cadences and routines that allow everybody to be on a consistent cadence. And so they actually had to alter the SAFe cycle slightly to match up with other parts of the organization that were using either Kanban or using Scrum on either 1 or 2 week sprints. And so we just figured out ways that everybody could still collaborate and let them do what they needed to do for the nature of the work that they had in front of them.
Pete, so did that mean they had to switch up the sort of frequency of the cadences that SAFe would naturally?
Yeah. There were a couple teams that were off by a bit that had to adjust when their things started and stopped. And then I'll just toss in my editorial on SAFe as well. My issue is not with a visual that's got all the activities under the sun that you can do to drive the work forward. My issue is that it doesn't create discomfort. And I think if you're going to change from one way of thinking to a new way of thinking, you have to force change. And so if you don't force change and just basically replace program management with agile program management, I don't think that you're serving the people that are going through that process well, or enabling them to make that leap more quickly.
Yeah.
That actually gets into our topic that we had with Teresa, where we talked about discomfort. I agree. I think that in order to change, you have to be in that realm of discomfort. And I think if you have big goals and you want to achieve that, that discomfort's going to be a little bit greater.
And that's honestly the source of a lot of the success at that organization. They had a burning platform because they had some problems with competition. They had some problems with some security issues and so on. And so they had a burning platform to make change. And it was already uncomfortable because we were already in trouble. And then when the changes hit, it was basically, it wasn't optional. And that was the other thing, is that with all of us in the pool at the same time, and all 3 elevations of the organization, from senior leadership to middle management to doers, all having to go through change at the same time, you're forced to figure it out together. And that's another powerful element. And so even if that's the other aspect of when I'm driving change at other organizations that have hired us, one thing that I've done just for the last year, I hadn't done it prior to that, and I kind of wonder why I hadn't, but I've learned that as we drive change, it's going to be at all 3 elevations all the time, consistently. I hadn't always done that because a lot of times we get kind of sucked into, we want you to teach our teams. And at some point you kind of say, yes, okay, I'll go teach your teams or coach your teams. But now I'm getting to the point where I'm asking, or not downright refusing business or outright refusing business, but basically saying, I don't want to bring your teams along if you're not bringing your middle managers and your senior managers along as well. And so John Smart talks about doing kind of a full vertical in Sooner, Safer, Happier, that I absolutely agree with. And now that I've experienced it more and more, bringing your business technology folks all the way down the pipe is really, really important. And then I'm also pushing really hard on folks that are outside of product and engineering, with basically teaching them ways to solve their problems without telling them that they're product and agile ways of working. And so I've had to partner with enterprise strategy or a COO or the folks that aren't in IT, because when IT does it, it just feels like, you're doing it wrong. And so when you bring other folks that they already respect, or you position the change as an enterprise-wide change, not an IT level change, you can get a different kind of traction. That, at least that's what I've been experiencing for the past year or so.
I couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. What really struck a chord with me was, like, oftentimes I think a lot gets lost in translation, because all these things that have been brought to the table are means to an end. And that end, part of that end is, yes, is reducing the amount of suffering involved in these organizations on their way to whatever that ethos or that burning platform or that measure of success is. And when you do that, you that's when you have an agnostic approach. You don't get so emotionally tied to one way or another. You're just about trying to solve problems. And I feel like taking that bigger problem, and sometimes there isn't really a burning platform, because a lot of these organizations are still cash ridden, right? And still there's a healthy amount of cash flow going on, and they're just trying to pivot in a way which sustains that cash flow. And so sometimes not having that burning platform makes it much more difficult to galvanize in an organization or create that slice, right? Or sort of, help
Completely.
enact that change and change behaviors and all these different things, which eventually take people out of their comfort zone and helps align them into, this is what we want to go solve. So I'm in agreement with a lot of consulting companies who find themselves in a bind at some point, because they think they can meander, Flânuers their way to whatever by taking a back door, which is oftentimes just training, coaching teams at the ground level within IT. And then you're spending, so much energy and time just hoping that somebody's door you're knocking on is going to answer and willing to have a conversation with, which can generate something, right? To move on. So I think you have to have that courage as an organization, a consulting company, or a change agent, to sometimes say, no, these are my pre-requirements to helping me helping you, or trying to figure things out is, what is your end? What is your burning platform? What is it that you're trying to solve? Is it, what does that mean from a social technical standpoint, from a people standpoint, the amount of FTEs, right? Do I have a principle understanding around middle management that I want to reduce because I want to bring business and tech together? So less middlemen I have, the better, the more conditions I'm creating for them to talk straight, one another, speak the same language, et cetera. So that's why that really struck a chord me, as far as like really going from taking a step back, going from what is that end game, right? What is that end game, and what are some of those principles we believe in to get to that? And then, it's much easier then to.
Don't you find though that in early conversations, those things are easy to say, and then when you start to do that sort of thing, like, they're easy to have this list of things that they desire, the organizations and the people at the higher level, who are generally the people with the purse strings, generally the people who invite you in with the budget and all that sort of stuff. And it's a totally reasonable thing. It's a really understandable thing that you start talking that way with them, and they go, yeah. And then you start to do the things and behave the way that will encourage that sort of direction and transformation. And they go, whoa, what's going on here? I didn't expect this.
Well, they often take
you're looking for places
Yeah.
where you can have an impact, and you're looking for that, so I'm a big Sooner Safer Happier fan. Dan and I have worked alongside John, and we've been in that, and I've also you know, taken Sooner Safer Happier and been somewhere else on my own and thought, right, I'm going to do a Sooner Safer Happier type thing here. So just to prove to myself, can I do it? And can you do it? Can you really start small in just like a couple of people instead of putting more people in there? And when the rubber hits the road, you start to do, when people sort of waver, you start to do that thing whereby, like, actually, I'm just going to try and get innovators and early. I haven't really anyone. Everyone said they wanted to do it, and then they sort of disappeared. And then it's like, right, so I'm just going to try and get innovators and early adopters from all levels, attract them in. So I'm going to experiment with behaviors to attract them to me, and then I'm starting again from scratch. You ever find that? And so the training kicks back in, and then the coaching after the training, and then you try and sort of get this critical mass, and then you try and sell it back to the organization and go, look, it's quite good. That's the thing that you asked for, the thing that I started to do that made you wobble. I'm giving you some social proof here now. But
Yeah,
that can be a thing.
hard
You have to go backwards before you go forward sometimes.
It's hard for organizations to understand the scope of the change when if you're a senior exec and you're kind of viewing it as a time to market problem to solve, it feels like it's a delivery thing. And that so I've got a ton of empathy for where people start, because why wouldn't you? Like if you're under a ton of pressure as a senior exec to prove ROI, get to market faster, make sure you're beating the competition, so on and so forth, it feels like, hey, I just need to deliver faster. Obviously, my strategies and ideas are great, so why aren't they all working? So that's where the lack of humility comes in. But I think the key part that I've used in the last couple of larger engagements that I've been involved with has been to incorporate senior leader cross-functional kickoffs before we get going. Because what I realized several times, unfortunately, very painfully, is that you'll have a C-suite member that owns the change, that truly is passionate about it, wants to see it happen, but doesn't have full alignment with the rest of the C-suite yet. They've gotten approval to go forward, but that's different than full alignment across the C-suite. And so I've seen one, all it takes is one or two other C-suite members that undermine it to kind of kill it. And so, or to just, who don't understand it, to accidentally kill it. They're not even trying to. And so starting with a cross-functional discussion to say, hey, this is people, process, data, tech, and leadership style are all impacted by this effort. Do you really want to do it? Because it's going to hurt, and it will require change. And I'd much rather have them have those discussions and fights at the beginning and say, you know what, we're not ready for this yet. I had one proposal that basically stopped transformation effort because we gave them a bunch of risks and assumptions. And when they reviewed them all, they were like, I don't think we're ready for this yet. And they said, we would have hired you, but we're not going to do it at all right now. And they said right now they're coming back for more, but they'll come back later. But I'd much rather have that than jump into something where they're not aligned and you don't know why you're doing it, other than one person's kind of North Star vision, than to just keep plowing. So I think that alignment, I've just learned a ton, and it's such a helpful exercise because you can unlock a lot of the speed bumps that you're going to have later. It's much more helpful to understand them up front. And so from a change management perspective, I always learned to scale of -2 to +2 to assess somebody's like readiness or support of a change. So -2, they're actively fighting you. +2, they're actively supporting you. 0, they're not, they're just kind of coming along for the ride. And so oftentimes our job in that moment is to be able to document all of that as far as where everybody sits, and then try to figure out specific plans for people to get them from a -1 or a -2 to a 0. I don't need them to be a +2. I just need them to shut up and not fight me for trying to drive the change. But all that to say, senior leadership alignment first is absolutely critical. And then we've also brought in their direct reports, and we do it separately. We have one session with the senior leaders to see what their hopes and fears are, what their vision is, so on and so forth. And then we have everybody beneath them do the exact same exercises, and we show the differences between the two, because this layer is thinking about something entirely different than this layer. And that forces a really healthy conversation as well to say, you know, as we go into this, what do we need to be aware of? So
Pete,
So-
I love that. And I'm probably going to steal some of that. And also, we should probably get together outside of this and collaborate on. I've built an upfront thing too. Like you, I've stepped on the landmines of not people not being aligned, and sort of like Matt's talking. You start get going and people, they're like, all right, we agree we want to go to this place, right? Right. Got it. Okay. So I'm going to start doing the things to get you to that place. And then they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What is this? What is this weird stuff you're doing? You're like, well, didn't you say you want to go there? Yes, but we don't want to do that. Like, got it. Okay. So you don't want to do the things that we need to do to get there. Got it. Okay. This is not going to work so well. And it would be way easier to do that on the front end. And when Sanjir and I were in the ICE EC course together, the cohort together, one of our instructors, he talked about how everything comes down to contracting. So I view a lot of this contracting in the coaching sense of like, we're going to agree what it is you want to do and how we're going to get there. And we're going to agree on this thing. We're going to agree on how we all show up, what our role, we're going to agree on this stuff, and we're going to continually recontract. And so when your contract gets out of whack, that's where things fail. And he was like, it's always contracting. It's always contracting. And the other
it's
thing,
empathy, right? I mean,
yeah,
the reason that I had to evolve to that point is not an indictment on the client. It's an indictment on me. If I'm not setting clear
agreed.
expectations,
Yeah.
and if I can't be empathetic enough to show them that path, like why would anybody want to go down a path that hurts? Like unless they know what's coming and the value of going through that. And so
Which
I
is
just
why
continue to evolve kind of how to do that. But
that's exactly why I'm working on, like, I've been
yeah,
working on that stuff. And it sounds like you've got some stuff I'd want to incorporate in, is because agreed, it's not an indictment on the client. It's I didn't do a good enough job of teeing this up so that everybody was clear.
yeah,
And one thing I'm curious about, Pete, when you talk about working all the way through, so what I have found, right, is that what they're coming and asking for some sort of process help, but it's, in my opinion, it's an internal, it's between the two ears and largely of leadership, and not an indictment against them. Like, this is not saying that they're bad people. We all need to change and evolve. And so if they want different outcomes, they need to change how they show up.
mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's what I found is that, and it's not just them, it's actually everybody all the way from the top down, is they all need the internal change. It isn't just about how we punch the keyboard or how we do project management. It's how we show up.
Yeah, it's not just the activities. I think there are kind of three components that include the activities, but it's also mindset, and then it's also collaboration patterns. Because it's what I've seen people. It's easy to teach people new activities and say this part of it is your job, and that keeps them in their kind of their traditional siloed learning model. It's something different to teach people, cross-functional teams, how we're doing something, and more importantly, why we're doing something, and what the skills necessary to do it. And then say, I don't care what team, like, I don't care what group you report up through, you're aligned around a customer and a set of problems that you're working together on. And you have to figure out how your combined skills and weaknesses allow you to take that forward. And the only way that I've found personally that all of that makes sense to me is by using shared values. And I try to use values that are not, don't have a lot of jargon in them. They're not the agile values and principles. They are a set of, at this point, I'm almost just calling them leadership principles. For a while I was talking, or leadership values, I was talking about as product values, and they still apply as that. But without like spending 15 minutes on it, I'll try to explain it very, very quickly. But it starts with intellectual humility in the center, and basically just saying, assume that we're wrong more often than we're right. And if I can accept that as a human being, it will change my behavior. I will, and I can look through these values as a filter on any process that I have or any thought that I bring forward. And humility is in the center. And then I've got three values that centered on delivery, which are bias toward action, kinship, and focus. Kinship is about cross-functional team. Focus is exactly what it sounds like. And bias toward action is basically saying, if I know I'm probably wrong, then I better experiment as quickly as possible to either disprove my idea or prove it out, and be detached from the idea enough that I can pivot and not get married to the idea. And then from a personal perspective, we get empathy, passion, and curiosity. So empathy, not just for our customers, but for our partners that we have to collaborate with. Passion for what I do, for the domain that I'm in. Curiosity as a growth mindset kind of instigator to say, I always want to be learning. And then basically beneath all of those values is trust. And then recently I'm adding it, like as of tomorrow, accountability. I just got done with a leadership workshop for another client, and somebody in the room basically said, I don't see anything in here about accountability. And I said, I think it's laced throughout, but I actually really like what you're saying because everybody's kind of accountable to each other. So I'm going to add that in there as well. But so I say all those things for values to say those things can apply to anybody in the organization. What does it look like to be a humble developer? What does it look like to be a humble business person? What does it look like to be a humble finance person, or HR, or learning and development? You name it. All of those things can bring people together, basically. And if you want to start talking about changing culture, which is always a big part of these efforts, aligning people around shared values at a local level can help you start to take a change at the group level, kind of go from there. So kind of long-winded, I apologize for a 30-minute call, but those are the things that I kind of try to use to drive change.
Well, we had a side chat, just quick housekeeping item. And Sanjuri said, hey, should we kick out the time? Do we want to break our 30-minute time box, gents?
We could do. That's
Okay.
teaching our major constraint there, isn't it?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind at all. I mean, I think,
Well, what next then? Who's asking the next question? Who's picking Pete apart?
Well, I have a bunch of stuff, right? I mean, Pete talked about values, and one of the things I find about SAFE is that they have their values. And I heard about was it Agile 2023, that I heard that some executive or somebody from a big bank, I won't name them, got up on stage and was like, hey, when you talk about these Agile values, so not SAFE, but Agile, did anybody ever come and ask us if that's what we actually wanted? So like SAFE comes in and says, here are these values, here are these principles. And have we even talked to anybody about, like, do you actually want these things? We're just saying, these are the things, go. And I don't think they're as ubiquitous as the ones Pete's talking about. So I thought that was, that's sort of interesting. I had something else about what Pete was talking about, but I lost it. So
but
Sanjuri, I know you've been trying to get in.
Oh, you go.
What's that?
Sanjuri was after more time. I'm sure you're brimming with questions.
yeah, no. I think, especially here in Europe, there's this, I think we're at another stage in terms of the adoption of a lot of these different approaches, especially the at-scale ones, because, obviously SAFE is, big sort of overhead in terms of cost, just implementing it, right?
Yeah.
Huge training overhead as well.
Yep.
And so I think before you even get into some of these very operational ingredients, like, these really core ingredients to implementing like a SAFE or some of these other approaches, you talked about leadership, and oftentimes there's this, I love your piece about humility, because oftentimes the leaders are sitting on their stand and saying they need to change or they need to figure it out, and they don't feel themselves a part of that process, right? And so that's been my number one, in all the different contexts I've involved. I've very seldom seen leaders, put themselves in. There's been instances, and that's created a different type of conversation as to, the how we get there becomes a totally different conversation, right?
Yes.
And that's how you talk about, culture and all these different things. And oftentimes the common thread I've seen with those organizations who have that self-reflective, humble approach is they have a very strong HR or people and organization leader who's involved in that, who's really playing that sort of glue role, change agent, because HR or people organization, whatever you want to call them, they have that cachet, they have that sort of green light to sort of on a transversal stage be able to cut across different functions and bring them together or help, enact certain conversations, right? And then build them into objectives, right? And that's the other thing you talk about, behaviors. We often look at this change as something like, everybody wants to do it. No, oftentimes it's just a collection of people who each have their own careers or ambitions or meaning that they give to the work that they, you know, bring about every day. Everybody wants to do well, but for different reasons. So if you don't have somehow some sort of a framework or lay of the land that helps sort of bring these people together and helps maybe construct some of this collaboration, all these things you want to change, such as common objectives, right? How am I incentivized, right? How do we define collective success, right? Is, you know, how are bonuses cascaded down, right? When a certain vertical hits, right? How am I rewarded as IT if I help solve a problem? What about finance? What's my role in helping move procurement forward? Legal, you know? So all these different parts of the organizations who were very valuable and have to at some point bring their piece to the game to make it, you know, to make the thing successful. They all have to see themselves and have, you know, feel like they have skin in the game. And that's the part that really takes a tough time. That's why these are, you know, transformations take 1, 2, 3, 4 years, because you have to carry everybody along. And oftentimes I think that's the part where once you have that core, like you said, Matt, the core leadership that has that sort of vision and has that buy-in, it's much easier for everybody to pull their weight, you know, from, you know, locally, as opposed to us as change agents doing that work, because we don't have that legitimacy.
Yeah.
You know,
There's a exercise that I do with those product values that I described earlier, leadership values, however you want to talk about them, where we go through it at 3 layers. We say, break them up into small groups and say, let's talk about the enterprise. How do we reflect these values today? Which 1 or 2 of them jump off the page as something that is provocative for you in your current context? Then we go down to the group level and say, okay, the group that you're working in, how do you guys represent these values? And how is that different than what you perceive the enterprise to be? And then I take it down to an individual level and say, how do you individually show up with these values? And I give them a 1-pager that's got about 30 leadership behaviors in it that range anywhere from, like, I personally am okay with being wrong until proven right, to I've asked my or require my teams to work directly with their customers if they're delivering a product that serves them, et cetera. So there's like 30 different things in there. And invariably you come up with a big list of anti-patterns that they see in their current world. And then I pause at the tail end of that exercise. And this is 2.5 hours basically of talking about values. Like, it's not everybody even wants to do the exercises, but by the time you're done, you're pretty engaged. And I just basically ask them, okay, so whose job is it to fix all the anti-patterns that you just identified? And if you're in a group of senior leaders, my hypothesis is it's the people in that room. And so when they recognize, and it's a powerful moment when they look around and go, oh, shit, that's me. And if you can actually, if you get to that point, it really can be a powerful, in the moment prompt to kind of, or catalyst to get some change moving. That fades away quickly when they're off back in the heat of the day for a couple of weeks. And so you have to continuously reinforce what you identified together at the beginning and say, this is what we said was broken. And we said you guys were accountable to fix it. And I'm here to help you do that, but you've got the ownership. I don't. And so that I've been really excited about that the last 3 times that we've done it. It has felt impactful. You had people kind of see that, you kind of see in their eye that a light bulb went on essentially behind them. And it either scares them or excites them, but any of those things is better than being numb to it. So super, super cool.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people be stunned by it.
Yeah.
So I mean, I'm more of a flow person.
Yeah.
Rather than talking about the values around product delivery,
yep,
I'll more take it to a lack of flow is or, an absence of flow is a presence of impediments.
Yeah.
And
or
so
like an operational value stream perspective.
Yeah. And then so like saying like evidence, like talk about these items of work that you all want to achieve. The reason you're doing them, you've asked for them, put them in there, and then talk about why they're not getting done. And then you'll start to see sort of like flow impacted, evidence of impacted flow because of the anti-patterns that you described.
Yeah.
And then I have gotten to a point where I've sort of said to people like, so does that look like the hell on wheels that you're trying to deliver, and all the things that are stopping you from delivering them? And then like, I'm going, yeah. And it's like, and it's, well, so what next? It's like, well, tomorrow, try and pick a few of these and try and get it flowing again.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was interesting to me before when we were talking about like people not being like people saying to you they're not ready.
Mm-hmm.
And I've witnessed people who aren't ready, but I usually just think about that as like, well, this isn't our problem then. Our problem is we have to go a step back to get you to this point where you're ready to do this thing. What's underlying that? And I sort of, one of the things like this point, what you're not ready for might be ensconced in this agile vocabulary.
Yeah.
But I generally sort of talk about myself as a continuous improvement person, so because that gives me the out of trying to not talk about it. So I can go back into business units and go, what is it you do?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm a business improvement person. Like generally in these organizations, it's like it's just a network of interconnected services.
Yeah.
So it's like service improvement.
Yep.
What are your problems? Well, let's run some experiments to try and get flow going in that. But when I'm talking about flow, I am talking about values, but I won't make them express their values. I'll probably make them depict the impact of not living their values.
Yeah.
And
No,
then
I love that. And
do you want
that feels like the combo that we do. Oh, I'm sorry to start
yeah, no,
talk over you. We also do at the beginning so just following that portion of the engagement, we go in and do an operational value stream to understand how do I take something from idea to release or concept to cash, and basically have the people that are closer to the work come in and identify all the pain points, because that's the other part of it. Is like you talk to the senior leaders, they don't even understand how work gets done from start to finish because they've been too far away from it for a while. It's not their fault. It's just they've grown out of the having to do. And so then you make those things transparent and you use the stuff that we just talked about at the senior leader stuff and say, okay, these are the concrete opportunities that I can provide you with demonstrating that you guys want to lead this change. And if you listen to the people that are closest to the work and they tell you all the pain points and all the friction that's in the system, it's your job to remove that friction, and you're capable of doing it. So let's go experiment. Let's go do it.
Yeah, and whatever they're telling you, that's them setting you work, and that's servant leadership. Sorry, get my teeth in. Servant leadership made manifest, isn't it? Like when people say, "Oh, servant leadership's a buzzword," it's like, well, what you've just described is, well, that's it in action. That's your prompt to jump in. They've told you what's wrong. That's them setting you work. Make it better.
Yep.
And you'll get what you want by serving the people who are doing the work for you. And I think, people want to know how that.
Yeah, and I think so we're actually towards the end. So why don't we are we good to close out, gang?
Absolutely.
Yeah, we're good.
I mean, we could go on forever, but
we may want to do a part
I could
two.
carry this conversation. I could talk about this all day long with you guys, but I don't think our listeners will listen to it. So because it'll get too long. So or our watchers, but at least based on stats of how long people are listening. So I don't think they'll listen to the end of an hour or two. We don't have Huberman status yet. So let's do our closeout. And I'll start with Sanjay. Do you want to close out with your thoughts?
I mean, it's really love the conversation. I think, and I think some of the listeners can take some actual practical approaches as to how to kickstart some of these very sometimes difficult conversations, right? And oftentimes you have to blend, sort of your sort of contractual obligation or your need to contract a job, right? And what are the jobs to be done versus, whatever context you're rolling in. And so bringing those two together, I think, is key, and being honest with yourself as far as like, am I ready to get into this thing either through the back door or the front door, and whatever it's going to take for me to, highlight, use the mirror again, using the mirror analogy, mirror with everything that's happening and that'll help spark something else. So I think, whether it's safe or any other approach, you've got to get in there and just kind of see things, align expectations, use some of that experience and help foster some of these conversations, these shared dialogues. And I think that's step one. I think at least if the viewers take that away from this conversation, I think it'll be well worth listen.
Yeah.
So I'll kick it
Pete?
to yeah.
Yeah, I just appreciate the opportunity to be here and talk shop. I love this stuff, and as I said earlier, I love it because it's a human endeavor. And as soon as we stop thinking about it as a human endeavor and think about it just as process or just as a framework or just as ways of working, you just can't expect it to succeed. We're asking too many people to change too many things for the betterment of the group versus their own individual agendas to expect them to just change for the hell of it. We've got to have a shared vision. We've got to have empathy for one another. And we've ultimately got to be focused on moving really changing the world together as a team, cross-functional team. And that is an entirely different mindset than a industrial revolution machine that cranks crap through the system. And so and I loved hearing from Matt on the emphasis on the flow and kind of just spelling out, hey, you're trying to get these things done. What's in the way? It's very practical mechanism combined with a little bit more of the values can be considered abstract, which is why I try to drive them back down to behaviors. But I love the combination of the two.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like from my wrap, I think like where I'm coming from with that is that like my belief in that you cannot think your way to new behaviors, but you can behave your way to new ways of thinking. And so that's my reluctance to accept. Obviously, if someone's going to go turn a slingy hook, I've got to go. But I'm reluctant to accept that thing of we're not ready. We're not ready yet for that. Like it dawns on people, and then like, all right, you could leave. And I'm saying, obviously, Pete, when you've described that's happening, obviously it's been like, yeah, we'll get back to, or whatever.
Yep.
But if there's still an opening, then it's like, yeah, don't worry about it. That's not what we're going to do. So, but I can be somewhere with some people where we can work out how you change how you think, but it's got to be like you said yourself, Pete, like a strong bias to action.
Yeah.
Do different stuff that will change how you think. You can't do it the other way around. So if I just leave now under the auspices of you're going to somehow change what you believe to invite me back, that's not going to happen. I'm going to go find another job.
Agreed.
That's my take. About you, Dan?
I'm sitting here loving the interplay of both. An article that I often cite with people when I'm like leading the IEC cohort or something, or just with clients, is an old HBR article. It's called "Culture is Not the Culprit," and it feels like it was just yesterday that I read it, but at this point, I want to say it's like a decade old. And it's got Richard Anderson from Delta, and it's talking about, and two other CEOs. And the point of the article is, you can't change culture directly. Like trying to go and change culture, it's not going to happen. You have to start by what you do. And I think there's two pieces to this. Like, I don't think it's an either or. I think it's a both and I think there is let's align on values and let's actually align on what those are. And I think the values can be different throughout the organ. Like there's overarching corporate values, and those you have to sort of kind of all have to align to those and be a part of those. But with any given team, that big corporate value, well, yes, it's important, may not be the value of that team. Meaning it may not be the value that's the most important thing to them. And so finding out what values are important at each level, I think, is important. And then seeing how they interplay to create the culture that you want. And so there's the sort of strategic stuff, and then there's the tactical of doing. And I know that you can I think you can go both directions at once, right? So you can start where you are and start with the flow stuff and start with some of that very practical behavioral stuff. And you can simultaneously be doing some of the, here's where we want to go as a big picture thing. Because we started with SAFE, I'll just say that I don't think that SAFE does a good job on any of those things. And I find that most of my time with SAFE is spent undoing the things they do, because I go into some place and they're doing all these different practices for a team of like 20 people. And I'm like, why are you doing all these things? Well, because Safe says so. It's like, well, but is that solving the problem? Like, that's why I agree on the problem that they want to solve, and we fix that problem. And that fixing that problem may be undoing all the things that they're doing because Safe said so. So I'll leave it with that. I don't know if it tied back to the topic very well, but it was a great conversation. I appreciated it. Pete, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Matt,
Happy to be here.
Sanjiri,
Great to meet
it's
you guys.
always great to have you. And again, at the Flânuers Cafe, where we will meet one day in person. Thanks for joining us at the Flânuers Cafe, everyone, and we will see you next time.
Take care, guys.
So, if you love our content, please like, follow, or subscribe and help us Flânuers some more.